Welcome everybody, this is the Tech Cave. My name is RJ and well, I've spent a bit of time with the Titan XP, a couple of weeks to be precise I believe, and found out rapidly after purchasing it that it does have temperature issues, and if you want to try and get rid of those temperature issues with the stock cooler, the only thing that you can do is turn the fan up to a point where you don't actually want to be in the same room as your computer. So, as it doesn't seem that there's going to be any other aftermarket or third-party coolers at present for this, I've decided to take the leap in going for water-cooled. Thought I would never do it. I was a bit scared, very scared in fact, to go for a water-cooled system. I don't like the idea of throwing water around in a PC. As you can see from the image here, that I have had an all-in-one system, which I've used for a number of years, and I'm quite happy to purchase these. They're all sort of set out. But there we go. I've decided to go for everything that I bought is EK. Don't any reason particular why. They seem to be a pretty good brand, well known by lots of people. So here you can see a picture of the pump and reservoir. Doing a bit of research, they seem to be a good brand, and decided to stick with EK for all the components in this. So I'm going to go through a video of my build on my first custom water-cooled system. So after determining what I could actually fit in my rig, and I didn't buy the case with this in mind, so it's quite a small case. Found that I can utilize these the front. Put this radiator in, as you can see here, with I've got two 140 fans in the front, so I thought, well, vertically I'm going to mount that and just put a radiator in there and I can fit it in. However, not being able to fit the reservoir in. So after a little while of waiting for EK to bring out the custom block for the XP, went about the arduous or worrying task of pulling apart a Titan XP. So here you can see a picture of really taking the shroud off, and there, my god, there's a lot of screws, a lot. Loads of little tiny screws. You need to make sure that you've got the right tools to take these apart. They're tiny little heads and they're pretty well tightened up, and the worry would be to kind of mash up one of the heads on one of these, which would kind of ruin your day, because I don't particularly fancy taking a drill to drill one of these out. So took the back plate off there. I'm not sure if I'm going to put the back plate back on, to be honest. Possibly leave it off. I think so. There you go. You can see all the screws for the back plate and the side plate, and there are plenty of videos out there showing you how to disassemble a Titan. There's no different really, I would imagine, from a Titan to a Titan XP or a 980 Ti. They're all pretty much alike. Just go around just doing all the screws. The heatsink block pretty much just dropped off. There was no real tugging or pulling. It was pretty easy to get off. But you can see by this, the scale of it to my hand, on how small this heatsink really is and how inadequate it really is for the job of something that requires so much cooling. So there you go. There's the blower and the thermal paste there, which I cleaned off. The EK instructions tell you to clear it off and put on their own stuff. Well, I don't know why. I don't know whether, I suppose that's it seemed whether you could possibly use that again, but I don't know. So anyway, I took it off and took a photograph of that, so you can see a few pictures of this just being pulled apart. Nothing probably that interesting there. You can see, there you go, GP102. So it all came apart pretty easily. I was quite surprised on how easily it pulled apart. There was a little bit of tugging on some of the contacts on there. There's two sets of connectors, which I just used a pair of pliers on very gently to pull off on the fan header. And there you go. You can see on the thermal pads, which the EK kit give you replacement pads to put on, and they all went on pretty pretty easily. The one thing I did find is that they don't stick. They kind of, you kind of push them on, but they easily come back off again. So it was a bit fiddly, positioning those pads and making sure that they stayed in the same place when you were kind of moving the block around on it, which did concern me a bit, that if you weren't very careful, that one of the pads would move whilst you were trying to align the block on the top. So just made sure that I pulled off any of the existing pads, and here you see the new pads on there. You follow their diagram, you cut those strips to obviously the correct length. Some of them come sort of trimmed for the memory modules, and then peel off the top. There you go. So you can see it all sort of molded on there. They've got different thicknesses, but it's pretty simple and easy to follow. Once you cleaned off the GPU, you then apply on some thermal paste. So you can see I completely blathered it on all over it to make sure that there's plenty of paste over there, and we're going to make sure we've got good contact. But it doesn't matter if you've got too much, it'll just ooze out the side anyway. And there we go. I used the box to sit this on. So because you've got the end of the GPU, the card, to go on that kicker where the display ports come out, or the ports on the end come out. So it's nice to stand it on there. And I spent quite a bit of time to make sure that everything was definitely aligned. And the instructions do recommend that you take the block back off again and make sure that there is contact. I was a bit hesitant and a bit scared to take it back off, that I would kind of wreck the pads or something in the process, but I did do that anyway, and just make sure that they were well connected on, just for peace of mind, because the price of this card, you've got to make sure that you do this job right. This is the first time I've ever pulled a reference card apart, so I was pretty nervous, so I kind of followed the instructions. One thing that did throw me, that in the kit, with the EK kit, and you've got to be careful of this, there's different lengths of screws, and it's not overly clear. It tells you to use the 4mm, not the 6mm screws, but I don't know why they put the 6mm screws in there. I don't know if that's because if you have a back plate, I don't know if somebody could put in the notes below, just why those are in there. I thought there was a bit of a bad choice for EK to do, because this led to sort of confusion, really. First off, I put the 6mm in there and pulled them all, sort of tightened them all up, and then looked at the card and thought, hang on, that's not quite pulled up. So there is a danger there if you use the longer screws in the pack, that this is not going to pull up tight. So just beware of that. Make sure that you've got the shorter screws. The 6mm screws, I don't know really what they're for. It doesn't really explain it, and they're just extra in the pack. So onwards and upwards, I installed the card. I made sure that I laid the case down on its side, so before tightening the screws up, to make sure that, because this is quite a heavy block, make sure it wasn't putting excess force on the motherboard. The one thing it does mention in the instructions is, when you're pushing down on the block cooler, is not to over tighten things, really. I don't know. So because you can crack the die. So obviously, I was pretty worried about this, and spent a good 20 minutes or so just kind of pulling up slowly, looking, making sure that it was pulled down. It's hard to see with the tape kind of bending over, but there we go. So got the block on, and now I've got the task of sizing the pipes up and where they're going to go. As I said, this case was a bit small, so I ended up having to mount the reservoir and pump outside the case, which I'm actually kind of happy that it is outside the case, because God forbid there's any leaks, but that's more water outside the case, in my kind of opinion. So I had to move it out the back, and I'll show you some an image of that in a minute, of where I decided to put. So at this stage, it was kind of putting things in place, and finding out where the pipes go. So one thing I would like to note is, when I had the reference XP cooler on, and with the motherboard that I had, it actually did clash with the plastic shrouding on here. You can probably see it in the middle of the image there. there's some plastic cowling that for some reason they seem to put on all these motherboards now, and that stopped the reference card quite seating down absolutely perfect, and I kind of had to push it on, and the screw that attaches the card went in slightly on the skew. So going to this new block was actually a remedy for that, because now this fitted in quite nicely. Just thought I'd take an image of that, and if you have this the same MSI motherboard, then you may find that as an issue. So here you can see where I mounted the pump reservoir. So I mounted it outside, slightly above the lower 140 fan. I did deliberate about whether dropping it a little bit lower and losing that fan, but I wanted to keep that fan in to exhaust more air out of the case. So it went up a little bit higher, and the bend that was on the pipe was acceptable because I chose a 1913 millimeter pipe, so it's a nice thick wall pipe, so it's quite hard to kink those pipes. So definitely spend extra little bit of money on the nice thick pipes, because they're really, you can get a really tight bend on there and it's hard for them to kink. So there you can see, nicely mounted. Had to drill through the case. Got to be careful about drilling the case when there's components in there. Go really nice and slow with the sharp new drill bit, making sure that you stop regularly, pulling out any tiny little bits of swarf metal, because obviously you only need the smallest fragment of that to be just floating around in the case, and that could be a bad day if that shorts out on your motherboard. So just be careful when drilling through on your case. One other thing that I'd like to mention also as well is be careful when screwing in the connectors on the water block on the GPU. Now the connection where you screw into, that's plastic, and you're using metal connectors. So if you're an idiot like me and connected the connectors onto the pipe first, and then tried to screw it into the GPU block, and I had too much length on the end of the pipe, and I was trying to bend the pipe round as I was screwing it in, I actually started to thread the block, which led me to a oh crap moment, and I thought I just screwed up the entire block, because if that's threaded then you're totally stuffed. So I cut the pipe and very carefully got it back and eyeballed it to make sure that it was straight, and then I had to kind of try and force the thread back in line, which then managed to get it back again, and it tightened up quite nicely afterwards. But I did actually start to thread the plastic, so just be mindful when you're screwing into that water block that is plastic. So you're using a metal thread into plastic thread, which can thread quite easily. So make sure you're not using a big loop of pipe on it as you're trying to tighten it up. So maybe that's just me, but maybe somebody else would possibly do the same thing. So but there we go. So right, so all the pipes are in, reasonable kind of loops on there. I haven't done a drain loop, but the reservoir's outside the case, so I kind of thought that it's going to be easy to unscrew that outside the case in future, and kind of date when I did this, and put a reminder on my calendar for a year or so's time to drain the fluid. I don't know quite how long I'm going to run this for before sort of draining it. I've never drained anything before because I've always used closed loop systems. So next, filling up the system, and here you can see my my ingenious device of filling. So opened up the top and thought, how am I going to pour this in? Don't have a funnel. If you don't have a funnel, then a plastic bag, cut the corner off, stuff it in there, make sure you open up the bag using the Allen key or something, and you can slowly pour it in. Might be a bit trickier if it's in the case, but in my case, this being outside the case, I was able to do this quite easily, and it worked really well. Sort of poured it in, filled it up to the top, use the EK connector. You can, if you find the pins, you can just sort of short out the pins on the connection that goes to the main power of the motherboard to rig this. But I just bought the block. I think it was £1.20 or something. So I've got it now for life. So there we go. So filled it up to the top, just about 5 or 6 times of switching the pump on and off. After filling, there we go, the final test. Yeah, I should have said you've got 2 cables to connect from the pump, one onto the motherboard and one into a Molex connector. I was a bit disappointed that it was Molex because I didn't have any Molex connectors in my case at all, so I had to put an extra one on the power supply unit. It'd have been nice if they'd have put the option in there to put a like the new SATA power connections in there. Would have been better than the Molex, but only a slight bugbear. But there we go. So put all the obligatory tissue around, double, triple, quadruple check that all the fittings were nicely tightly done up, and started the fluid going round without the motherboard switched on. Although all my fans were on because that's just the way it's configured on my case. I could have pulled them off, but it was fine. Left them on. The fluid, it's got loads of air bubbles in to begin with. It takes about 20-30 minutes for those to kind of filter out and kind of tip the case backwards and forwards a little bit, but it seems to slowly get the air bubbles out. I shall continue to keep checking the levels in my reservoir for the next few weeks, and periodically just to check for any leaks. The way that I've kind of got this set up though now, if there are any leaks, hopefully, unless it comes out of the water block, hits those fans at the bottom and then sprays it everywhere, hopefully where the water leaks it would just drop into the case, or obviously on the reservoir outside the case. So tested that for a couple of hours, and switched it off, plugged everything back in, and then started. But so conclusion, I had the XP, which is a fantastic card. It really knocks the 1080. You've probably seen plenty of other videos about it, about how much faster it is than 1080. I went from the original XP to the original Titan X to the new X Pascal, or the XP as people are calling it. Fantastic jump in speed. Yes, it is damn expensive, but if you're after VR performance, which I am, it just blows everything away. It really is good. It really is that good. It's well worth it. The throttling I was unhappy with, the temperatures I was unhappy with, the noise I was unhappy with. This custom loop has completely sorted all that out, and in the future now I've got this set up just to accept any new cards, so I'm really pleased with it. The temperatures, which always went to around 84 degrees, because that's where it was kind of set, and then it was throttling. Now I don't think I've seen anything above in the 40s, so I don't think it's ever hit 50. Overclocked this, getting around 2000 megahertz on it, and it's rock solid. I'm not over pushing it because I don't really feel I need to. I've got a 60 hertz monitor, so I don't need any more than 60 FPS, 90 FPS for VR obviously, and I can super sample and turn everything up to absolute max on it, so it's fantastic. So overly happy with it. For a complete noob, this isn't as scary as you think, so if you take your time, do your research, take plenty of breaks in between sort of stages of pulling your card apart and putting it in, have plenty of cups of tea, and make sure that you just really do take your time with it. It's fine. I found it to be a fairly easy process. It seemed pretty daunting to begin with, but not as bad as you think. So there we go. I can fully recommend putting a custom loop in for the temperatures on anything really. an all-in-one solution would be good. I know people are saying you can get the EK Predator. That's damn expensive for an all-in-one system, in my opinion. I know you can add to it, but I've got a custom loop now for almost the same cost, and I can kind of do what I want with it in a way. So I don't know, there we go. So that's my video on doing a custom call on a Titan XP. I'm going to do another couple of videos of frame rate performances on it, and plenty of the VR goodness on the videos to come. So if you like this video, give it the thumbs up, and if you like my videos and want to see any more, subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you on the next video. My name's RJ, this is the Tech Cave. Bye bye.